We acknowledge that Mount Allison University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship signed centuries ago. We recognize that many of our alumni, students, faculty, and podcast guests live in communities beyond the Mi'kma'ki, across Turtle Island and around the world. As we engage in conversation, reflection, and learning through this podcast, we invite all listeners to reflect on the lands they call home and the Indigenous peoples who have cared for them since time immemorial. As treaty people, we share a responsibility to engage respectfully with this land and with each other, to listen, to learn, and to honor the truths and histories that shape our shared future. Hello, everyone. It's coming on to homecoming week here at Mount Allison. I'm Carolle de Ste-Croix, the Director of Alumni Engagement. Today, we are joined on When Ducks Leave the Pond, the Mount Allison Alumni Podcast, by a Sackville-born Mount Allison alumnus, John Moore, from the class of 1979. John spent 2 decades as the iconic voice of the Halifax Mooseheads and continues elevating junior hockey through the platform sportsandmore.com, where his coverage has become essential listening for fans across the Atlantic. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you, Carol. Thank you for the introduction.
Oh, well, I'm sitting in a spot right now where I think you probably spent a good deal of your time. I'm in formerly Truman House, now the McCain Student Center. So, John, your story about Mount A is a bit different because you grew up in Sackville while your father was a faculty member at Mount Allison. I think we all remember those students in our school that were, the teacher's kid or the principal's kid.
Yeah.
Was that kind of like that with you?
Well, when we moved to Sackville, I was 7 years of age, and that was Dad's first year with the geology department. Yeah, I mean, I think Dad was a proud member of the faculty, and we understood, my brothers and I understood just how important the university was in the town. We were townies. That's who we were. And then Dad would go off to the university, and we would trek up there at different times to see him in the Abbott Dixon Center and visit with him. And he would show us the different formations and displays, and we were all fascinated by it. But I guess, as young boys growing up, we began to understand that Mount Allison was a very special place.
Yeah. And so did your dad's role obviously influenced your decision to attend Mount Allison? What was it like to study in a place so tied to your family life?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't sure. I knew that just listening to my father talk about the students and how much work and how they had to be, if you're going to be a good student, if you're going to go to the school, you've got to be a good student. You got to be committed. We could see that in dinner conversations. We would hear the stories of various students, but still almost a little bit as a young boy growing up, a little bit intimidated in the academic world. Not sure, your father was a professor there, and was that something that you might do? But there's no question that, yeah, we knew there were so many good things that happened at Mount A that we either experienced through my father or just as townies going up to the campus and watching the excitement and all the things that unfolded there.
John, you were a student athlete at Mount Allison. Can you tell us about that and the role that varsity played in your academic career here at Mount Allison?
Well, yes. I mean, I was there to study and become educated, but I also, varsity hockey was very important to me. I wanted to play on the varsity team, and being there for 4 years and be able to grow as an individual. And the varsity program not only did it make me a better athlete, but it gave me a better understanding what you needed to do to be successful whether it was on the ice or whether it was in the classroom and as you went into your work career. So I think varsity athletics, again, it gave me a good understanding of how important your teammates were and how you needed to be a team player. And so I think that those were some of the things that were big benefits at the time I probably didn't recognize. But then on top of that were the relationships with your teammates, who for 5, 6 months of the year, you're inseparable. You were there with them daily, every day for spending time, and then how those relationships grew from that point.
At Mount A, we often say, well, it's really a place about relationships, as you mentioned, and mentorship.
Yeah.
And you just spoke to that. How did that kind of environment with the relationships and the mentorships impact your career?
I understood that regardless what it was, if you were, it was a team approach. Whether you were going to play a varsity sport, whether you're going to go to work in the office, whatever it was that you chose to do, there had to be a strong work ethic. You had to have a work ethic. And I think that that was one thing I learned there. I certainly, when I left the campus, was far more confident a person knowing what I think I needed to do going into my career. And those are just some of the benefits. But yeah, again, at the time when you're the varsity athlete, you don't understand perhaps all the desirable characteristics that you're acquiring until you're perhaps out into the field.
Now, when you graduated from MA, you went off and did further studies.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about that and how you came about deciding that this was what you wanted to study?
Well, I knew that I was hoping I would be able to find a career in sports, and sports media was something which I felt that was off at Mount Allison with my Bachelor of Arts English degree. I felt, okay, I could be suited to work in the sports media world. So I was in the Fanshawe College Broadcast Journalism program, which is a highly regarded program, and spent 2 years there, which were really grounded me in exactly what was needed to survive in the industry. And that pushed me forward. But it was a difficult program to get into. But again, I believe at the time, the fact that I had the Mount Allison University degree may have given me a little bit of an edge into that small group.
Yeah, it's amazing. We know by our research that 70% of Mount A grads go on to some type of professional or graduate work. That's an extremely high percentage. So, yes, you definitely fall into that 70%. John, tell us about, so you've kind of finished at Fanshawe. How did that, how did you get from there to the voice of the Mooseheads for 20
Right.
seasons?
Well, I'll give you the quick version is basically after a year and a half, I was still looking for work. The economy was not good and it was difficult finding work. Eventually, I did get an offer to work with Charlottetown with CFCY Radio as a news/sports reporter. And then 2 years later, landed in Halifax working for Chum in radio and television. So that was my start in this market. And then again, the economy took a turn for the worse, and 20 of us were laid off from Chum. It was a blow to 20 of us, and we were unemployed. And at that point was when I felt that the Halifax Mooseheads would just enter the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and were looking for a broadcast team. They were looking for a broadcast partner. They didn't have one. I approached them. We reached an agreement, and then I went back to my former employer, Chum, and purchased airtime and began my journey forward.
So when you started doing that, did you feel prepared for it as someone who was doing it on their own? Was there anything that you wish you had been better prepared for or had known about?
Well, yes, because again, I was, as I mentioned, I had an arts degree. I had no knowledge of. I think I took one commerce course. It was commercial law, and I think I struggled. I think I struggled with it, but I did get through. But I think that looking back on it now, as I would tell any young broadcaster, reach out and acquire as many skills as you can. Where you never know when they will come into play, and if you've acquired them along the way, you won't feel as if you don't have those skills. So, yeah, take a few commerce courses to all those those art students, and that did help me going forward in the business world.
So now you're the voice of the Mooseheads. Tell us how preparing for a game broadcast looked like for you. How much time goes into it, into researching players and storylines? And what strategies did you put in place before you put the headset on?
Carol, the work really is done long before the game begins. Once the game's underway, you're just letting your broadcast talents take over. But on game day, quite often, if I was on the road on a game day, you'd head to the rink at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. There would be a pre-game skate. Both teams would be there. It'd just be a chance for them to get warmed up, tuned up for tonight. And you would go and you would check out the lineups, find out who was playing, who was injured, and not just for the home team, not just for the Mooseheads, but you'd want to know about their opposition as well. Back to the hotel, you'd have your pregame meal, and then you spend a couple hours in your room inputting statistics into your scorebook, preparing, familiarizing yourself with whether it's stats or trends that are occurring. So, and then you're off to the rink at 5 o'clock, 2 hours before game time, and you get to the game. And again, there's one more sweep around the rink to do interviews with both the home coach and the visiting coach. And so that by the time the game you're ready to go, you feel totally prepared for what the game might throw at you.
You're known for kind of you have all broadcasters, I guess, have a signature style. How did you find yours? And were there any influences or mentors that help you shape what your voice would sound like and your style would sound like when you're broadcasting?
Well, again, initially it was radio. So I've always felt whether you're doing radio or TV broadcasts, there has to be a certain level of energy. And I like to think probably I was high energy, in no way sacrificing accuracy, but you'd want to bring excitement to the broadcast. Whoever's listening or watching, if the announcer doesn't have interest, then they may not stay and listen as long as you would like. But I think that radio, you're painting a picture as if your audience is blind, and so coloring the broadcast is extremely important for the person who can't see the game. TV is a different matter. You don't have to focus so much on that. It's more about the pace of the game, and the game has become so much quicker in the last 10 to 20 years. You've got to be on it continually, describing the player what's happening, as opposed to painting the game as you would in radio. So there's two different calls, but again, I always felt that obviously you want to be accurate, but I would always like to think there was energy in the game, whether it was the pregame, the game, or the postgame show. There was lots of energy there and reason to listen.
Now, you've called thousands of games. Are there particular calls or championship runs or player milestones that still give you goosebumps when you think back?
Well, I was very fortunate, Carol, to have been involved with so many international events as well beyond the Mooseheads, which Halifax was during the 90s and into the 2000. There were World Juniors, World Women's, World Seniors, and it was quite a run for the IIHF and the CHL. But I guess if I look back over the games, there would be 3 games in particular, which I recall fondly, and it would be perhaps the moments which I couldn't believe I was there. But the first one would be the Halifax Mooseheads winning their first and only Memorial Cup. That was back in 2013 in Saskatoon. Nathan McKinnon into the empty net in the final minute, and Halifax defeated the Portland Winterhawks 6-4. And that was for the Mooseheads, who had been unable to climb the pinnacle. They hadn't been able to climb the mountain, and they finally had their their first Memorial Cup championship. In 2022, calling games for the St. John Sea Dogs. The Sea Dogs hosted the Memorial Cup, and the Sea Dogs, who were certainly the underdogs going into this tournament, went on to win it all, defeating the Hamilton Bulldogs 6-3 before a sold-out TD station in the port city. It was a wild night, and that one is particularly significant to me because my former roommate and president of the Sea Dogs, Scott McCain, was at center ice lifting the cup over his head, and to see the joy and the excitement for a lifelong friend, that made for a very special moment. The third one would be the World Women's Championship in 2004 here at the Scotiabank Center. They played before sellout crowds, and then it came down to the gold medal game, and Team Canada beat the Americans 2-0. The stars for Team Canada back then, Kim St. Pierre was in goal, Jana Hefford, and Jen Botterill was among the Canadian stars. So those three would be my top three.
Well, those are a great top three. I have a personal interest question for you. I've always been amazed when I think that, a really small place like Halifax Regional Municipality, and if you look at the NHL and where the players come from and what a small number of NHL players there really are, how does a place like Halifax produce a Marchand, a Crosby, and a McKinnon in the same era? Like, was that just weird luck, or were there things in place that you think made that trio of professional hockey players possible?
It's a great question, and I wish I had a very clear answer. It's been asked, and I think it's certainly Halifax. The programs here in Halifax over the last, during the 90s, in 80s and 90s, the programs, developmental programs, minor hockey associations, they started to upgrade. I felt there were more people, there were more opportunities, more development, not so much just winning and losing, but developing players. Now, Sidney Crosby, we knew we had an exceptional athlete there at an early age. I think it was 7 years of age, and we knew that this was a special player. And then, of course, he was in the Cole Harbour Association. Well, Nathan McKinnon is also from that association, and he came along about 5 or 6 years later. Sid was playing in the queue with Rimouski Oceanic, but had graduated and moved on. And then Nathan came along, and then right on his heels, Brad Marchand, out of the TASA program. And Brad is both Sid and Nate were coming out of the gate. We knew how good they were, high draft picks. But Brad Marchand no one thought Brad Marchand would be the player he has become. And again, I give credit to all three. I know them well. I've seen them train, off-season training, their commitment, their dedication. And it's, I think the associations for sure, they can take some credit, but they're just very special individuals and just so committed. And the fact that the three of them train together, again, it's an elite group. I've watched out in the Bedford area. They have a rink where they bring in top end NHL players, and they train 3 or 4 times a week for 4 or 5 weeks, and it's high level. And if you ever witness that, you just see how intense and how hard and how driven those players are.
Oh, thank you for that. Calling a game live means that anything can happen, and any one of us who has done anything live knows that some of our biggest challenges that we faced is when you're kind of broadcasting or doing a play or anything. So is there kind of one memory you have of a game that didn't go so well, where you had to kind of adapt on the fly? Is there one incident or something that you remember that makes you chuckle a bit, but at the time wasn't so funny?
Well, yes, I can think of a few of those nights, Carol. But uh, I think, I would say I learned fairly early is be prepared for the unexpected. Because on the road, not so much at home, because at home you have support. You have a color commentator, you have a runner in the booth, you have someone back in the studio producer. But when you're on the road, it's really the play-by-play and the producer back in the studio in Halifax. So you are on your own. Occasionally you have a color commentator, but so you almost go into the broadcasts thinking, okay, what if my first period intermission guest doesn't show? What am I going to do for 9 minutes? What if a pane of glass is shattered and I've got 20 minutes to fill as they try to find a new pane? Those things happened both in the same night, and it was something that at the time I was a little stressed, but I learned that you've got to have a backup. You've got to be able to get to a extended commercial break where you can run out of the booth down to where the scouts lounge is, tap a scout in the shoulder because you've built a relationship with them. Tell them, can you join me on short notice? Yeah, John, I'll come to the booth. So those are the kind of things that that have happened and occurred. And at the time, but you get through it. But you learn that what's the backup plan if that doesn't happen. So yeah, it's live. You're going to have we've had periods where the broadcast is offline for 5 or 10 minutes, and callers are calling the radio station, and you're feverishly trying to patch it together technically. So, but yeah, that's part of the business.
Exactly. Yeah. It, one of the other things I wanted to discuss with you is how do you see the arrival of the Professional Women's Hockey League changing the hockey landscape in Canada? Um, what excites you about what is happening with women's hockey in Canada, and what are the challenges that you kind of anticipate or that you see?
Well, that's a big question. Having had a daughter who played the game at a high level, I and coached women's hockey. I've always had a fond spot for the women, the girls, and I'm so pleased to see the growth, what's happened with it. I think that because of the professional league, I think you will see uh, enrollment will grow. I'm quite certain of that. Um, Quite often, it has been in the past. They haven't the girls. There hasn't been retention, meaning they've played for 2 or 3 or 4 years and then they stop playing. They don't play in other leagues. So I think that may change. I think that you talk about the landscape of women's hockey. I think there's great potential for further expansion. And I know that one city that is in the hunt, so to speak, is Halifax. Halifax is looking at acquiring um, a franchise to play out of the Scotiabank Center. And I have no doubt if they're able to secure that franchise, it'll be a great success. So it's a great time. It's great to see the women's game growing. And yet, we're all aware Hockey Canada is going through a difficult time right now, and there have to be some changes. And I'm not certainly privy to some of the ongoing changes, but certain parts of the game have to get better for our game to be healthier.
That's a really interesting observation. What do you think the my last question, I think.
Okay.
It goes by very fast, these podcasts. What do you see as the biggest opportunity and the biggest concern for the future of hockey in Canada, both for men and women? I mean, you spoke a bit about Hockey Canada, but are there other kind of things that you kind of reflect on and think, oh, goodness, this is good or this isn't so good?
Mm. Well, I was involved with the women at the minor level, so it wasn't high level. It was basically helping out in that. And I might add, I was actually the coach of the Mount Allison women's team back in the day. I'll share that with.
Yes, please tell us about that.
Well, there wasn't. It was there wasn't a league, but we had a club. It was the Mount Allison Women's Hockey Club, and uh, uh, Scott McCain, Al Laird, and I decided. Al was working at the rink, and we decided we would get in behind these girls and run practices. I think we had 2 practices a week, and we played a number of games. Traveled to tournaments, won a tournament in Charlottetown, and but that point there, women's hockey was there were some university clubs. There were a lot of high school teams, and so a lot of times you'd go to a tournament and there'd be 6 high school teams and maybe a couple of university club teams. So we had 15, 16 girls. We had 2 or 3 girls from the town, and then the rest of the group were all students, and it was fabulous. It was fun, a lot of fun.
Oh wow, it's so great to see the women's hockey team at Mount Allison now kind of be part of the league. They've got a fabulous coach, and you can kind of see them building. It's been 15, 20 years now since we've had a varsity team. So good to know that there was kind of an OG story to it, and glad that you guys were part of it. As you know, there is a construction going on campus right now where Allison Gardens was for the new multi-sport center, the McCain Wellness Center. How do new facilities like that impact sports? So I'm sure you've seen, new arenas, et cetera, being built.
Yeah.
How does having access to kind of world-class facilities help athletes?
Well, first it brings the athlete to the center. I mean, we've seen it here in Halifax when they put in new facilities, new whether it's a new rink or a new athletic center. There is a greater chance athletes will come to that location, to that area. So I think that like any athlete, you want to be training in the best conditions possible. You want to have facilities and state-of-the-art facilities and good people around you, good coaches, good trainers. And then that's what athletes want. That's the way they can develop as they would like. So I think that, and I know it's not just about varsity sport. Wellness is part of the package. But I do know, I know it'll have a tremendous impact, and not just for a couple. This will be ongoing for the years ahead. That this area and this building, this facility will attract students, varsity students. I can tell the old athletic center though. I can tell you, as a young boy, we used to spend so much time at the athletic center or alumni field or Allison Gardens. I can't begin to recall how many hours we spent there as just living in this town itself and the excitement that it brought.
I can share this with everyone because we're going to be doing a bit of social media about this. But as you know, Allison Gardens has been not there for a number of years, and it was a parking lot, and now it's going to be the new wellness center, multi-sport center. Anyhow, all of a sudden, a couple of weeks ago, the contractor told us that they found something when they were excavating and starting to kind of put the walls up. They found a hockey puck buried in there. So we have it. We're going to kind of share it out with everyone. We think perhaps when Allison Gardens was built, perhaps someone threw a puck in there for good luck. But yeah, they were excavating, like digging to put the walls up, and they found a puck, a hockey puck. It was a crazy story. It's awesome.
Well, it's like the loonie they embedded in the center ice during these international events, and Canada hosts them. So maybe someone threw that in there knowing something.
John, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing some great advice for our students about how to get into broadcasting and what they might need, and kind of your how varsity athletics kind of led you to your career. We really appreciate it. I really appreciated having you here. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
A sincere thank you to the executive producer and director of our podcast, Kay, who is the quadrant intern at the Alumni Engagement Office. A sincere thank you to them, and especially to the fine folks at CHMA FM Radio who have made all of this possible by allowing us to use their facilities here on campus.
Mount Allison strives to be a safe, respectful, and welcoming place for people of all genders, diverse sexualities, gender identities, and gender expressions through education, programming, support, and advocacy. We prioritized upholding, maintaining, and honoring that environment during the creation of this podcast.